All right, so this is the Brown Duke Gun Show. My name is JP Garcia. Here today, as usual, with Brandon Alias, and special guest today, we have Austin Menard. Austin is actually a co-owner with Brandon in Sentry Manufacturing, and they manufacture AR charging handles, which is timely today because we are going to talk about AR-15s. It is a very hot topic right now with all the politics and all of the debates going on. You know, all different laws being proposed, changes, all of that stuff. I think it's time to do an AR-15 show. We start from the basics and we're going to go all the way up and just try to answer as many questions as possible.
In an hour.
In an hour or less. Well, and you know, there are so many comments that we get on all of our other media, right? Just talking about ARs. It's super popular. So I think what we'll do today is we'll just frame our discussion around where do you start with an AR-15 and then where can you go with an AR-15, right? So when people walk into the store, when people come to Sentry Defense, this is the official podcast of Sentry Defense, by the way. Mm-hmm. And but when they do come to the range, what do they ask for? And then what do you guys recommend?
So they usually like, hey, first time I want to buy a rifle, like what do you recommend, right? And it's like, oh, well, what is your budget? Pretty much what it is, right? So I think there's like 3 different tiers. There's a beginner tier, anywhere from $500 to about $1,000 price point. Then you have an intermediate tier that goes from $1,000 to probably about $2,000. And then you have another tier that's like the high-end market, right? Very name brand type of guns and gets into more like, hey, I have this type of gun, right? So it depends on how much you want to spend. And I think there's good guns at each price point. Just depends on what you want to do with it, right? So beginning gun, if someone's like, hey, this is not really serious, I just want to go to the range, shoot with my friends, and everything's fine, then you can kind of buy whatever. If you're going to use it for self-defense purposes, I'd say at least spend right around $1,000. Okay. Right? Like Springfield Armory makes great guns for $1,000. SIG, those major gun companies, they all have AR-15s around $800 to $1,000 dollar price points. And they all work. Like they have good barrels in them, good bolt carrier groups, and mil-spec stuff. You can put your life on it, right? Yeah. After that, I'd say it would be like the intermediate market, where you go into, you have better coatings on certain parts. You have a better name, like maybe Daniel Defense, BCM. Mm-hmm. What are some other ones? Sons of Liberty guns,
getting up there.
Right.
Yeah.
Noveski, right?
That would
is
probably
more
be
of a
the
higher
next one.
tier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So around that middle price point, I'd say like that's kind of like where you really want to be. That's where most of my guns are, because you have very high quality parts, but you're not just paying just for the name, right? Or just saying like, hey, I have this, you know? Mm-hmm. So I usually try to steer people more towards that, because for $1,500, you can buy a really good gun that's going to last a lifetime, and you never have to worry about it. Like you can hand it down to your kids, right? And if you decide like, hey, I'm going to start shooting more, like that gun's going to hold up, you know, under heat and things like that. Then after that would be like the high end market, like Knights Armament, Noveski, LMT, guns like that. They're great guns, and like I've had some of them. And yeah, like whenever you put one of those in your hands, like you can tell there's no rattle, there's no movement in the gun. It's just like everything's quality, right? But you're going to pay for it, right? You're going to pay over $2,000 for those guns. And it kind of gets into almost like a pissing contest, I guess. Like, hey, like look how cool my gun is, right? Like I had a Knight's gun and I ended up selling it just because it's like, man, I'm almost scared to shoot this thing, right? Because I just always wanted to own one. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna buy one. And I bought one and I was like, don't really want to use it, you know? Because I can sell it for so much money that's like, no, I shouldn't have it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, your dad has a SR-25.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Never been fired.
Never been fired.
Never been fired. Amazing gun, right?
Yeah.
But that's whenever you start getting like different technology and bolts and like really high end stuff on that type of market.
Yeah. So Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, the budget is definitely always the first question, because especially people that are just getting into it, they either have only seen what they have researched, which, you know, if you Google, want to buy AR-15, a Noveski is not going to pop up, right? It's going to be a $400 AR-15. So budget is always the first question. And then Brandon touched on it a little bit. The second question is purpose, right? Because while you might have a budget, your purpose might not fit in your budget, or your budget might not fit your purpose, right? If you have a $400 budget for an AR you want to put your life on, you're one of those is incorrect, right?
Correct.
So that's the first two questions that we ask, and we do get a lot of people that come to us with this, and we definitely love it more than somebody that comes in and says, I want this $400 AR,
right?
Because it makes our job a lot easier when it's like, okay, you're looking for something, you want to put your life on the line with this gun, or when the time comes, you want to be able to trust this gun with your life. So it makes our job a little bit easier. So that's the first two, like Brandon said. And definitely 100% agree with Brandon is that they do have guns and manufacturers in that lower tier, in that $800 to $1,000 range that, even I'd be willing to trust my life with.
Sure.
And a lot of them nowadays are even coming somewhat kitted up.
Yeah.
Smith & Wesson has a rifle for right around $1,000 that comes with an optic, a grip, backup iron sights.
Sure.
All the stuff that after the person buys their $1,600 rifle, you're like, okay, now we got to do this. And they're like, wait, there's more?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, you haven't even started, man. Your car doesn't even have tires on it.
Yeah.
You
Right.
can't drive this thing.
Yeah.
So that's the two big ones for me is what's your budget, realistic budget, and what's your goal here?
Yeah, I kind of and I don't work at the range, right? But what people ask me also, because I'm a pretty active shooter, in the community, and when people do ask me, I recommend kind of this weird metric, I guess you would say. It's like, well, you spend the amount of money you spend on an AR should be $1 per round equivalent to the number of rounds you're going to fire, right? So if you're only going to shoot this thing 500 rounds a year, then you should only be spending $500 on this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I say that because if you're going to depend your life on this gun, you should be shooting way more than 500 rounds a year. Right. Mm-hmm. You need to be proficient with this weapon. You need to be able to do different ranges at different speeds, all of that stuff. So that's going to put you into the 1,500 round mark at least. And I think that's also minimum, but if you're going to spend 1,500 rounds shooting, then okay, yeah, you can spend the $1,500 for a gun,
sure.
And that's kind of where I say it's like, okay, because if you're going to be shooting it, 500 rounds or less, and it's a toy.
Sure.
It's like, okay, and it's okay to have a toy.
Yep.
That's perfect. But at least you know what it is. And, the benefit of having a nicer gun, you're never going to see it, right? If you spent, like, for example, if you're like somebody who goes out and shoots a gun, 20 rounds, you go to the range, zero it, and you keep it in your safe for the rest of your life. Well, like, what does it matter that it was, a $2,500 gun? It's zero. All guns are going to zero, and if the pleasure was just zeroing the gun and having it in the safe, I was like, well, do that with a $300 gun.
Yeah.
And they do that all the time. They come in, like, they'll bring a family member or a friend, and they shoot the gun. They might shoot 50, 100 rounds out of it, maybe.
Right.
So they're never getting the gun hot enough to actually see stuff like start malfunctioning.
Right. Yeah, you're never going to bend a barrel. You're never going to,
Or like have a gas key walk loose or something like that, or gas block stop working, or like
get clogged up. Or,
We've seen bent gas tubes before, like, because they're getting so hot with silencers and things like that.
Yeah.
They probably will never see that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, so that's probably a good segue into, I guess, my next question would be then, what would the differences be, right? So we've talked about price, okay? So there are different manufacturers that make different, AR-15s at different price tiers, of course, right? So, and people talk about, and we just mentioned that quality is the difference as you go up in price to a certain extent. After a while, I think you're paying for name, right? Yeah. But up until that point, there are some quality differences. And so you just named a couple. What are the quality differences that you see in an $800 gun versus maybe a $1,600 gun, right? So one that's double the price, and compare that, or kind of talk about what you see come into the range for repair or things that go wrong with the kind of the lesser tier guns.
Yes, I think the two biggest things is like coatings and material.
Okay.
Like if you have a bolt carrier group that's made out of carpenter steel, then it's like name brand steel. It's like Kleenex, right? Like it's a name brand from this steel company. So it's gonna hold up. Like it's tested, it's ready to go, and it's phosphate coated, right? Whereas some of the cheaper ones are maybe nitride coated and a off brand of metal, right? So it might work for a smaller tier gun or something you're not going to shoot a lot. But if you really want to make sure that you have the top quality materials, you just can't like spend $500 and expect to get those, right? The material costs more to make it. So like they can't offer it at that price. Like that's what you're paying for mainly.
Right.
It goes into every part. Like gas tubes are the same thing. You get a gas tube that's out of a different metal that's not mil-spec rated, or it's not nitride coated. It's just regular. So the higher price point guns, they might do the extra step of nitride in that gas tube and make it a little bit slicker and a little bit easier and stuff like that. So you get all those little things, I guess, in a higher tier gun.
Sure.
You know, after that, on the like higher end part, like on the over $2,000 market, you're getting quality control, I think.
Okay.
Because like you're still using the same parts, but like every part, every gun that goes out of there, they're meticulously like checking everything, like the fitment of it. If it's not right, then they're going to scrap it and do more. So that's why you're paying, because they have more scrapping of these guns because they're like, this doesn't go to our quality. So we're going to just like trash them. Right. So you're actually paying for that trash gun because that cost goes into your gun.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then some of the engineering things like LMT has like a barrel swap, so it's all a one piece upper, and you can swap out the barrel with like two screws.
Yeah.
So that's patented. You know, like they came up with that. They have a certain bolt head design on their guns. Knight's Armament has a certain bolt head with a certain receiver extension, things like that.
Yeah.
So you're paying for that engineering also.
Okay.
You know, that'd be the difference.
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah, your perspective, Austin. What do you think?
Yep. So, similar perspective. You're paying for materials of engineering. So you're paying for higher quality materials that the bolts, bolt and barrel, really the heart of the rifle. That's the bolt and barrel is what the heart is. What they're made of, what they're coated with, like Brandon said, and then quality control, of course, like Brandon said. There's videos out there, you can go look them up on the internet, of smaller gun companies that are selling $500 ARs, and these guys are putting the handguards on with torque wrenches, like it's and then you look at it, something like Daniel Defense, where this person torqued it by hand, double checked it and everything. We're making sure fitments are lined up, so that's what you're paying for.
Sure.
Is you're paying for that quality control. So you asked a good question, and I think it's something that a metric that we never probably look at it from, is what comes into the shop for repair, right? I can honestly say that in that kind of middle tier that we talked about, just four guns, Daniel Defense, BCM, Geisley, Sons of Liberty. Yeah. I've only been there, a year and a half, 2 years, but I've never personally had one come in for a repair.
Okay.
Hey, my gun's not shooting.
Right.
Now we've had, hey, add this to it, but strictly like a repair.
Or if someone like try to do a repair themselves, like install a muzzle device and they cross-threaded the muzzle device, but that's like a user thing.
It's a user thing,
right? It's like not because of the gun malfunction.
Gun functionality, because without somebody messing with it.
Right.
The cheaper ones, I don't know if we want to get into names, but
let's leave the names out of it for now. Let's say you divide the price by two.
Yeah, we would just say $400 to $600 ARs. We've definitely seen them come in weekly.
Yeah, weekly.
Gas blocks walking off because again, they don't. The manufacturers don't expect the round counts. So maybe somebody did buy a $500 AR and they're putting 2,000 rounds through it in one day. It's the gas block is not rock set. It's just walking off the barrel. So eventually it stops working.
Yeah.
We've seen feed lips that don't line up, so it can't cycle the gun.
Yeah.
We had one that was the barrel was bored out too much. Remember, wouldn't cycle.
Wouldn't cycle.
Yep.
And that was a pretty reputable lower tier name. So even in the lower tier, that if it's a name that you've heard a billion times, again, they are pumping out guns. So you're that's the difference, right? Like we said, that's the quality control difference. Barrel coatings, not holding zeros. Not holding zero is another one that goes into your torque spec, right? So how well and how carefully are they torquing down the barrels,
Right.
And then also what's the barrel made out of? If you've got a pencil barrel, those are a lot cheaper. They're not going to hold zero as well when they heat up, like something like a cold hammer forged barrel.
Gotcha.
So I think that's what you asked a good question as far as repairs and what we see, and that's the difference.
Right. And I think that's telling, right? That you know, in the shop, you guys, for that lower tier gun, right? And again, like I said, it's a toy gun. It is what it is, right? But those are the guns you're actually seeing come in with problems, right? With manufacturer problems.
Yeah.
Go
Once
ahead.
you get into the $1,000 one, you don't see them anymore. Like it stops. You know, it's just like the $400 to $600 range. Like there's a lot of guns out there that's at that price point, and they're always messing up. But like you get like a SIG or a Springfield, like we don't see those
Never.
come in. You know, we definitely don't see like Daniel Defense or anything like coming in with it. So that's why we always usually try to say like, hey, I know you're at $600 right now, but like really, I need to get you to 1,000, right?
Yeah.
Like if anything you need to do, if it's not buying, and we've told people that like, don't buy a gun today. Like go home and save more money and come back whenever you can get 1,000. I promise you, you'll be 100 times happier.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So like we've steered people away from buying guns, right? Or like worst gun salesman ever.
Well, we say it all the time, right? Like we people will come into the shop and like they look for the $400 AR, right? And we're like, no, we don't have any, and they don't understand. It's like we're here to make money, right? But we sell things that we trust our lives with. So like if us telling you that hurts your feelings, like I apologize, but in the end, you're going to be a lot happier when your gun isn't breaking and you have something that you can trust your life with, right? So that's the mindset that I believe that we kind of carry at the shop. If you want the $500 AR and you tell me, look, it's a toy, it's a plinker, it's for my kid, I have a gun at home that I trust my life with, more than happy to get it for you. But can't in good conscience sell you a $500 gun that you're telling me you're going to trust your life with.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, now there's another market here that we're really not talking about is the market of people buying their own parts and then weaving them together to make a gun, to make an AR-15.
This is my favorite topic.
Because they're like, oh, well, I bought this Daniel Defense XYZ and I bought this other bolt carrier and I'm, and they're Frankensteining a gun together, and they spent $1,500 in parts.
Yep.
And probably more by the time you buy, because they think it's cheaper, right? Because they're like, oh, I'm only spending $200 right here or $200 there. But if you add everything and then you get shipping from all those different places, you're well over what it is just to buy a gun brand new.
Right.
So it's only if you want to do all these different parts and instead of switching them out, you do that. But you also run into like tolerance stacking.
That's right.
Right. Like whenever you put that gun together, it is kind of like Legos, but it's not. Like you can do it in your garage, but you also have to have gauges and make sure like all this stuff is properly spec'd and it's inside that like that realm, right? If it's not, then it's not going to function or it's not going to last very long.
That's right.
Right.
So
if you spend like you said, they get to the $1,500 mark and they show up and they're like, yeah, I've got this I've got a Geisley handguard. It's like, man, great. I've got a enhanced bolt carrier group. It's like, oh, here we go. We got something good. And I've got a pencil barrel. It's like, God, like why?
cheap out on one part.
It's like why? So and we Frankenstein a lot of guns. Like the two guns that I trust my life with as far as a home defense gun and then the training gun, which are clones of each other, are Frankenstein guns.
Right.
But every single piece is quality.
Right.
Which at that point, the tolerance stacking is much lower because everything's quality.
Right.
Versus you introduce one bad part and your tolerances is way out now, just from that one part being cheaper than the rest of them. So we're more than happy to walk people through the Frankensteining process, but there's a point you have to realize that you can't skimp out on certain parts or else your gun's not going to work like you want it to.
Right.
And we also know how to put them together.
That's right.
Right. Like we have vices, like we have
Torque
all the
specs.
torque specs. Like we have all the tools in order to put them together. So if you're doing it at your house, you might do it, but you're not putting like rock set on the gas block. You're not like actually pinning the gas block or drilling into the barrel to make sure that it's in there, right? They're just like throwing it on, and then next thing you know, the gas block's walking off the gun, like Austin said earlier. It's like, no, you can't do that. Like they don't know completely how to build it. So if you want to like do that and say, hey, like this is what it is, we do have a part where you can bring us all the parts and we can put them together for you.
Yep.
Sure.
Right. We have a build like price point for that. So a lot of people take advantage of it, but if you bring it halfway done and I got to take it all down and then do it, it's going to be more expensive. So just like get with us first and then do that.
Yeah.
We'd be more than happy to build your AR for you. And we'll be more than happy to tell you if we think that there's going to be an issue in the building of that gun. Because we'd rather, like we said earlier, if we're going to stamp our name on it, we're going to at least give you our 2 cents before we send it out the door, right? And make you aware of any issues that we think that the gun might have. But yeah, we've seen it all, cracked uppers from, I put a cheater bar on on this barrel nut and went to town on it.
Oh, the tinkerers. Yeah. Look, and you guys built my rifle and I love it. And, sentrydef.com if you need to get a rifle or parts and get them to build it for you. But I think that, the thing that you guys said before, it's that, whether they build a gun themselves or you get something like a Daniel or whatever, they're generally going to go wrong at that higher level because of a user error, right? Whether it's putting it together or, now they bought a built gun and then they're just trying to tinker with it and do something else, I don't know what you do, lighten the trigger or whatever it is you want to do, and they get and start digging on that gun. They start taking the Dremel to the gun and then everything starts to go bad, right? So don't do that. If you want to Frankenstein a gun, that's okay. Have somebody professional build it for you. If we're not in your locale, then find somebody qualified to do it, or just order one. Right. I think the last part of this that I think would be interesting is, okay, so we talked about the low tier and really who that's for. It's really kind of the hobbyist that just wants to have an AR, and that's fine. You have a $500-600 AR, you shoot it once a year, bango, you're done, right? You have the person who wants to, kind of have a home defense weapon, and that's really what they're looking for. They want to stake their life on it. They want it for home defense, and that's kind of another tier and another persona. And then you have the high-end guns, okay? And I'm making the assumption here that the high-end guns and the medium-tier guns, from a functionality standpoint, are the same, right? They hold group. They do, they will always go bang when you pull the trigger. What are you paying for in a $3,000 AR, a $5,000 AR? And I can talk from a competition standpoint, right? So a competition AR, when I used to do 3-gun, they're going to come more gamed out, more purpose built for the game, right? So they're going to be lightened. They're going to, have gamer stuff on it, right? Not to dig into the gamer stuff, but they're going to be very purpose built for the game, right? Going back to like a defense weapon, what do you guys see is the advantage to going to that, higher tier $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 gun?
I think it's like whenever you pick up like a Knights or like an LMT, like you're saying, like the upper and lower fit is like, it's perfect. Like it's not rattling, the gun's not moving around, it's not doing any of that stuff.
Right.
And then also like anything that is known of breaking in an AR-15, like your cam pins or your bolt heads, your extractors, anything that's like a normal wear product, those guys have like kind of like pushed the limits, right? So like if a barrel is going to wear out at 50,000 rounds or 20,000 rounds, this one might last out to 50,000, right? It's going to like increase a little bit more, or your bolt might never break. Like Knights Armament and LMT are kind of like famous for that. They, like heard that they never had a bolt break. Right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So like just the way that their bolt's designed, it's not like doesn't have as much a stress on the lugs, so the lugs don't break off.
Got it.
So you're paying for that, and it's guys that have like, hey, I have enough money that I don't want to have to worry about it. Like I just buy a gun and out the box is going to be ready to go. I don't have to like sit there and test it or like look at every part because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right.
They'll buy those guns.
Okay.
So it's something they know for sure it has a stamp of approval on.
Right.
Okay. That's what I see.
Okay. Austin, what do you think?
No, it's same thing. And availability too. It's just like sports cars. There's not a billion Knights Armament guns out there.
Right.
When you find one, it is somewhat of a collector's item. So you're either a guy that's obsessed with quality or you're just kind of a collector. And I think Brandon kind of touched on it all, that every time you pull a trigger, the gun's going bang. The only thing that's going to break one of those things is one of Bubba's pissing hot loads, or you did something wrong.
Right.
It's harder to break than it is to make it run easy. So that's the same way I see it.
I think the one thing that we talked about earlier on that probably needs to be mentioned too is that the materials that they use, right? Is that you know at some level when you get to that higher tier, the material cost alone is the price of that gun, right?
Yeah.
And I know that for a fact from the competition world, because I know Infinity, they a lot of the cost of that Infinity pistol is because of the steel that they use, right? And they're very picky about the steel that they use, the hardness and all of that stuff. And Brandon Strayle will tell you, he's like, okay, well, we pick this type of steel, this certain type of steel, because the molecules are closer together and that makes the steel harder.
Yep.
And that's where we start, and so, and just by nature of picking that type of steel, it just makes the gun more expensive, right? And I got to imagine it's the same thing with rifles.
Yeah, we're dealing with it right now with charging handles, right? Like we're building charging handles, and we're picking the grain of how the aluminum runs, right? Like it's that much into detail where it's like, hey, it's stronger if we get material that is cut this way, but it's a little bit more expensive. But like we have to have it cut this way because it's cross grain. Right. So like all that stuff goes into that. So if you're going to have it at that low of a price point, they can't do that. Right. You just can't buy the material for that amount of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we're almost, we're in that kind of tier 3 realm of charging handles. We're trying to be the best of the best. And so like Brennan said, is that when you get to that point, you have to be able to make sure that like the LMT bolts, like this thing's never going to break.
Right.
So in order to do that, you're not just looking at, how well is this thing put together? We're talking about, like you said, directional grain of the metal that we're using. So in
Coil
order to,
pins,
coil
right,
pins,
everything.
Coil pins down to the, a hundredth of an inch. Just like, no, if it's a hundredth of an inch long, it's not going to work.
Right.
That's the level of detail that we're looking into. SentryManufacturing.com. But yeah, that's the same thing. Like, it's materials, right? So you buy a bolt carrier group for $100. They're making these things. They're nickel coated. They're not even corrosion resistant. And then you look at an LMT bolt that's got materials made from hooks from an aircraft carrier. It's like you're on two ends of the spectrum here.
Right.
So that's really what you're paying for, is that quality of engineering. And we've seen bolts break, we've seen charging handles break, we've seen extractors break, we've seen bolts blow up. It's like we've seen it all. But with these higher tier ones, we can't make them break. It's like even like the Frankenstein guns that we run, like my machine gun. It's never even had a malfunction, but it's the quality of materials, but it's also goes into the build quality, right?
Right.
Everything's torqued properly. Everything's rock set where it needs to be rock set, Loctited where it needs to be Loctited. So that's what you're paying for. And all in all, it would be in that tier 3 quality gun.
Sure.
But that's what you're paying for, is a gun to never stop running.
Right. And the cost and labor and the materials to put that gun together
right.
in that way.
Yeah. Right.
All U.S. made parts. Like
Correct.
That's another thing,
Yep.
right? Like if you have a military contract, you have all U.S. made parts, like down to the spring that you use has to be made in America.
Yep.
Right.
It cannot be made in China and imported in.
No.
Right.
So you can pay a little bit more for it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. The only other topic that I think that we see a lot that I have to get out is, if you do buy one of these mid-tier to high-tier rifles, please, dear God, put a good optic on it.
Yeah.
Please don't buy a Ferrari and put cheap wheels on it.
That is a whole other show, right?
I know.
It's optics and ammo, skill builder ammo.
That's right.
Skill builder ammo. Yep. Please put good parts on them.
So I promise you this: we will do another show specifically for optics.
Awesome.
Let's do that.
Accessories.
Yeah,
Accessories,
because we can, because that's a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
Minimum.
So, all right, very good. So I think we've covered a lot of things with AR-15s. It's a good primer for anybody who's in the market for an AR-15. You guys, can you think of anything else you guys want to talk about from the AR-15 perspective? Last thoughts on, people looking to get in the market or people who may be in the market and, maybe want to upgrade or anything like that?
Even if it's a question, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer questions. We care more about the integrity of the idea than we do making a dollar, and we've kind of already made that prevalent. We're more than happy to help with any. There's no dumb questions, so reach out to us at Sentry Defense. Give us a call. Ask for Brandon or I. We're more than happy to answer any questions. And if it's something we can't help with, we're more than happy to point you in the right direction.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So that's sentrydef.com, defense or at Defense Sentry on Twitter. You can find them on Facebook, all the socials, they're all out there, Instagram and everything. Facebook is Facebook, Instagram's Instagram. You don't know if we're going to actually get to see your message or not, but Twitter's very good, email's very good, and all of that stuff is on sentrydef.com. So, gents, thank you. This was a fun one. I promise you we will do an optics show soon. All right, thanks, guys.